Now grab yourself a bottle of water or a cup of tea, because that's right, we are stepping into what many people are saying is the British Fallout, which I highly disagree with, and we're going to discuss that today, especially since we have Fallout London. But yes, today we are discussing Atomfall. This is a new game coming out of the studio behind Sniper Elite. And it's quite an interesting game, to be honest, and it took me by surprise. Today I'm going to be giving you my Atomfall reviews discussion video and my impression so far. My Atomfall review, the full video, will be out very shortly, but today I want to discuss what this game actually is, and of course do a full Atomfall reviews discussion, because I think a lot of people need to be made aware that this game is honestly not what you think. This game is completely far removed from Fallout, but I've seen everywhere, all over YouTube, all over the social media that I try and stay away from as much as possible, that it's basically being compared to Fallout.
Oh shit, here we go again.
And basically I'm going to be giving you my predictions of Atomfall and the Atomfall reviews, because honestly this game is not what you think. Oh sorry guys, I haven't taken my crazy pills today. Just let me, oh YouTuber, I love asking for likes. One thing that I will say is you'll never see me going, you know, opening wide just for that big old, you know, that big old mouthful that I'm just awaiting for the YouTube thumbnail. I'm not doing that shit, okay, YouTube?
Hey, you wanna see crazy?
So Atomfall is quite a curious game, and if anything it reminds me of We Happy Few. It reminds me of games like The Outer Worlds, where it's very condensed, and even a new game that just came out, Avowed, it does remind me a lot of that. Obviously the genre is completely different, but the way the game is laid out in its level design and its interaction with the NPCs and stuff like that, it does remind me of Avowed. And that might scare some of you away, and I understand that, and I'm going to get into all of the positives and negatives with my Atomfall review coming very shortly, but let's actually just discuss what this game is, shall we? Now, if you're somewhat curious about Atomfall, which I understand, if you love games like Fallout, you're bound to be curious, well, you can go and play Atomfall at a discounted rate, a huge sale, by just using my link down below on Instinct Gaming, and you can get the game for much cheaper. It's a win-win and it supports the channel, so check it out. So yes, do subscribe and become a wise one today as we look at gaming with an analytical lens, and I also blend my gaming content with philosophical content as well, just about life and everything in general, and my deep video essays around video games I deeply love, and my yearly reviews and all that good stuff. And if you want to check out my co-hosted reviews with my buddy Doppelrack, there's a playlist as well, so go check it out. Plenty of content for you guys, so join the community.
Sign up now and prepare for the future.
At its core, Atomfall is a narrative-driven experience, okay? It's also somewhat, at times, a detective game, a puzzler. You truly have to manage your inventory in Atomfall, and that does remind me of Resident Evil at times. The combat itself can be quite clunky, but it is satisfying. I really love how all of the NPCs, you can choose how you want to interact with them, and you know, you can actually just kill them all if you want. It actually allows that, you know, freedom of choice, which I really like. And that does again remind me of something that we saw in We Happy Few. The more people you take down, the more consequences there will be. I love the discussion and the kind of conversation system in Atomfall, because it's not like you ask a particular thing based on your knowledge, what your character has, because this is something you need to understand. This is not an RPG. A lot of people are expecting Atomfall to be like Fallout Light, but I hate to say it, this is not like Fallout whatsoever. This is not even an RPG. There's even consequences to actually the conversations, and that's really what I love to see in narrative-driven games. You know, conversations with different characters that actually you know, say something about you, the player. That's why games like this are very interesting to me, because it basically holds up a mirror to yourself and asks you questions like what kind of person you are, what are your biases? Why would you trust this person but not another person? It does have some elements of Fallout, and I can see why people are comparing the two. The enemy variation in particular is very Fallout inspired. It has ghouls, it has robots, it even has plants that come alive, which, if you've played New Vegas, you'll know what I'm talking about. This is not an RPG, okay? You do not get to build out your character in a narrative way. There's different dialogue choices, yes, but you can't actually build up your character and stat into, like intelligence or, like particular knowledge about a certain thing like you would in that type of RPG system. What I find quite interesting is with the conversation system, it's kind of based on emotion. It's based on how you react to that NPC you're, talking to. So you can be, kind of standoffish with them, or you can be direct. I really do like that element, and that does kind of remind me of games like LA Noire as well, because you really have to get the information from particular people, and if you don't, you're going to be missing out on something. So how you ask these questions and how you go about it, that is where the fun conversational dialogue choices come in, and it's quite different from other games that do a similar thing. The exploration in this game to me wasn't exactly satisfying, and I'm going to discuss that more in my review. There is a lot of micromanagement with crafting and managing your inventory, so if you don't like that type of survival experience, you're definitely not going to like that here. But one thing that I really did appreciate is with the combat. I think a lot of people will find this refreshing simply because it's not bullet spongy. It doesn't take tons and tons of shots to take down an enemy. It's actually quite immersive in that regard. Also, ammunition is quite rare to find, so you really have to be careful with it, and that does make it feel much more of a survival experience. The looting system, again, is very similar to that of a Bethesda game, but I would like to compare this more with smaller focused games like We Happy Few and the Outer Worlds, or even Avowed, because the play spaces that you actually engage with are very small and very tightly designed, almost like a DLC sized, and that is where you really need to understand that this is not a dynamic world. These characters aren't running around interacting with each other. There's not random events as you explore, and that is quite disappointing, and at times it does make the game feel lifeless. And remember that this game is coming from the people who made Sniper Elite, okay? And they have been stuck in the past for quite a long time. I would say their games haven't really evolved that much. I know there's a core audience that love their games, and I do love them as well, but I think I've kind of given up after 4 because they just feel very samey and they don't really try new ideas. At least with this game, they are trying something new. I'm not going to go into any more details. You'll have to watch my Atomfall review, which is coming out very shortly. So now let's do a broader discussion around this game. And finally, let's, round off the video with my predictions of what the Atomfall reviews will be, and if it's actually even worth picking up. Is Atomfall worth playing? Now, I would put this game very much in the AA space, okay? It's certainly not AAA, and at times, it even fails as a AA game, technically speaking. The LOD issues are quite apparent. Graphically, it's not the best. I think it's even coming out on PS4, so like 2 console generations ago. So it's certainly very limited in scope and design, and graphically it's not that pretty, I would say. At times it can look good, and it just depends on your preference for art style. To me, it looks a little bit generic, but that doesn't really matter. If the gameplay is good, art style above graphics at all times, and especially gameplay. And that is what's quite interesting about this game. But I really have to preface that this is not Fallout, okay? What I love so much about Fallout, and I could gush about it for ages, because I recently just went back and modded the hell out of Fallout 4, and I'm finally enjoying it, which has been just a huge surprise to me, as I am much more a fan of the older Fallout games. And the reason why people are so excited that, maybe they can experience like a light version of Fallout, you're going to go into this with the wrong expectations and you're not going to enjoy it. And I really hate how, game journalists are kind of amplifying this conversation that this is Fallout Light, okay? It's really nothing like Fallout at all. It's not an RPG to begin with, basically, or it has some light RPG elements, but there's no like different factions that you can really engage with morally and like reflect on their philosophies, their belief systems. Like I said, it is introspective dialogue, which I really like, which asks questions about yourself and your kind of biases towards certain people, and the psychology aspect on that is quite interesting, and I think they're doing a good job with that. And there are different groups here, like the druids and stuff like that. What I mean is you don't change, drastically giant outcomes in this game. There is choice and consequence, but not to the same level as you would see in a Fallout game. And the same thing with exploration. It doesn't yield interesting exploration, okay? At times it can be, but it's more about following a clue, following a lead, okay? That's where this game thrives. It's trying to go for that detective gameplay and that puzzle element where it doesn't hold your hand, you have to figure stuff out for yourself. That's where it's good, but if you go in expecting that this is going to be a Fallout experience, then you're going to be very disappointed, and I really just wanted to make that my main point. Now I just wanted to highlight that because that is the general conversation that I see happening around Atomfall and just discussing this game. I do think, now let's talk about the reviews of Atomfall. I do think that Atomfall will be a mixed reception, mostly because of that perception going in. A lot of people aren't really thinking that deeply about it. Also, the studio behind Sniper Elite, Rebellion Games, okay, they are very much, kind of bread and butter, okay? And yes, I sound very British, but that's what I mean. They are very good. What I mean is they are very good at sticking to something that they know that works, okay? Like Sniper Elite. They've really just focused on that game series for far too long at this point. This is their first time stepping into unknown territory, and elements of this game, it really works, but there's also elements of this game that feels like it's undercooked, okay? It needs to cook a little bit more. It's quite limited in scope. But if you're looking for a stripped back experience, then I think a lot of people are going to like this. But please set your expectations, because that was the whole point of this discussion. And the reviews of this game, that's the problem. It's going to be a mixed bag. It's going to get probably like 7, safe out of 10s from IGN and stuff like that. Some people are going to be hugely disappointed with this game and feel like it doesn't offer a lot. Some people are going to heavily get invested in the story here, because what I've seen so far, the story is very interesting and engaging, especially since you can kind of shape the narrative direction and choose, how to follow. Even though it's kind of the same narrative, you can choose how you get there. And I think that's going to be interesting for some people. A lot of people might come at this with the kind of feeling that they're trying to copy elements of Fallout, and I can see why you might think that. And I personally do feel that a little bit. The enemy variation, for example, feels almost like a cheap, copy and paste of Fallout, but without any of the lore, without any of the interesting elements that make these enemies so interesting to engage with. They literally have ghouls, they have robots, very similar stuff, but they are doing their own unique thing with it. So you just really need to disconnect the two. And I know I'm talking about it a lot, but that's only because I see so many people bringing up that this is, a Fallout game, basically just set in the UK. And I know that's a meme, but a lot of people are actually thinking that is true. Set your expectations more in line with something like We Happy Few, and the gameplay itself is actually very, very similar to that game. And if you don't like that style of game where it doesn't hold your hand, you have to figure stuff out yourself, basically reading through a bunch of stuff and gathering information to unlock the next part of the story and progressing in small, like little world spaces, like small open world areas, I guess you could say, but it's not really open world, they are quite tiny, then you might like this game. But otherwise, just be warned, because this is very much a AA experience, and I'm just glad that they are experimenting. We need more games like this, especially with the emotion and the dialogue system, with the emotion responses. I think that's quite unique and different. The reason I love gaming so much, especially narrative driven RPG games, is because it is a reflection point. It is that introspective special storytelling that you can only get with video games, because you are making the choice. It's not like reading a book or engaging with a movie, and games need to focus more on that, because that's where you can learn more about yourself and your psychology, your philosophy, and I really do love that. But I just want to gush what's good about the game, and there's plenty of good about it, and I'll talk about that in my review, but also just set expectations. And I think it's going to be a mixed bag overall. 7 out of 10s, some 6 out of 10s, and some people praising the game like an 8 out of 10, but it's not going to be a masterpiece, that's for sure. Even if I do actually like the game, I don't think it's going to reach that high status level. But there you go, that is the Atomfall reviews discussion video. Look out for my full Atomfall review, and I'll be seeing you in the next video. Have a great day, and peace out.